you feel envious of your kids growing up in the digital age? Like, if only I had had YouTube. How many of you feel like, whew, at least these pictures from my middle school years and high school and college are not on the internet? Okay, I feel both ways. I feel both envious of my kid growing up in the digital age because I truly believe, and my research points me in this direction, that there are many ways that tech makes our lives better and that tech advances opportunities for our kids in their learning, in their socializing, in their development as human beings. And I also share with you some of the reservations that you have about the ways tech can also kind of collapse boundaries, that can make it hard to get away from work, can make us worried about our kids' public reputations at a time that they should be really free to experiment with who they are and be silly and all of that, not worry about that stuff. Right, so I understand those challenges, but I also want us to think about truly how much better in some ways our lives are because of the technologies we have access to. What I want to do tonight is show you some ways our kids can use this power for good, and also show you some ways we can minimize some of the downsides, and also work with some of the challenges that come up. Some of you may work in tech and you know perfectly well that there are apps that can monitor everything you do, everything we do, right? We need to think about using the power of monitoring for something positive, though. We don't want to just spy on our kids, right? And we also don't want to say, oh, I put that app on the device so that I'm good. We don't have to talk about things on the internet I don't want my kid looking at because I filter the internet. I don't want to scare you, but that's a little delusional. First of all, your kid can go on anyone else's device. Secondly, your filter probably doesn't work as well as you think. You still need to have the conversation, in other words. You still need to have multiple conversations about content. It's not like a one and done conversation, like one time when they were 5, I told them there was content on the internet that wasn't for kids, now we're good. Right, so mentoring is the part that's not optional. It's optional to use any of those kind of devices to sort of support your parenting if you want. There's really no mileage in covertly getting data about what your kid is doing, whether it's what they're searching or anything else. If you want their passwords, let them know that having a condition, that's your condition, right? That I have to have your password. What do you want the password for? Well, I would tell them what you want it for. And be really explicit about what your concerns are. And then also somewhere along the way, if you are monitoring your kids, maybe communication or where they're going on the web, think about how you're going to back up from that. Right, but it's always with a plan to be backing off and always with a plan to be mentoring, not just monitoring. What we don't want to do is catch our kids doing the wrong thing. We want to teach them how to do the right thing. If we are covertly monitoring our kids, we're painting ourselves into a parenting box, because then what do you do if you see something that you don't like or concerns you? How do you bring it up, right? It's a really tricky situation that parents have come to me with, like, I've been reading all my kids' texts and now I see something I don't like. Well, it would have probably been better to disclose that you're doing that. The other thing is your kids should know that even if you're not doing it, some other parents in the community are. So it is good for them to know that there's a good possibility if they're on a group chat, somebody's mom or dad is reading that group chat. The younger the kids in the conversation are, the more likely that is. As mentors, one of the best ways we can be mentors is let our kids mentor us. So that means if your kid wants to play Fortnite, let her teach you Fortnite. If your kid wants to you have a YouTube channel, sit down and look at what that means together, and together make a decision. That doesn't mean you're not in charge. I want to be clear. You're in charge. You're the parents. But you can look at some of this together, and you also don't have to know everything. Every time your kid asks for an app, if you don't know what it is, you can say, I don't know what that is. Well, I'm going to have to research that and then get back to you, right? You don't have to green light that thing while you're online at Target and you don't even know what they're asking for, really. Ask them what the implications are. Relationships are important, and it's really easy for little bumps and hiccups and challenges to come up in relationships, and tech sometimes can exacerbate. It doesn't really make the problems happen, but it can exacerbate them, or it can lead to misunderstandings. How many of you have had a misunderstanding based on a text? Anyone? Right. Okay, so our kids are going to have the same problems, except they have kids' social skills instead of grown-up social skills, so have less experience to help them kind of balance that out. Reputation is something to really think about, but I would argue that we want to have a really positive spin. However, all of us are going to have reputation errors, whether it's sharing someone else's news, whether it's something going out about us, whether it's as simple as a picture that we wish someone hadn't shared and we just don't like how we look in that image, right? Or it could be something much worse. It could be something where we're really embarrassed and we wish we could sort of claw it back. Ask them if they know kids who represent themselves when they play games or in a group text or in social media in ways that don't really reflect who they are. What's the difference? What is this person really like versus how they act in social media? How can we be pretty much the same? How can we be aligned in how we represent ourselves? That's the struggles you have getting your kid out the door when they want to watch a show. That's the struggles you have not letting them maybe watch a second or a third or a fourth. It might be the struggles you have with yourself, not watching a third Netflix when you know you really need to go to sleep. It might be that you sit down to do work and you do something else other than work because your computer has so many other things, other portals to other things to do, right? So all of us are living in this world that's kind of this incredible, there are these incredible cabinet of wonders when we sit down to a laptop, tablet, or phone, and there are times where we're going to end up going down a rabbit hole. So how do we help our kids do a little bit better than we, and how do we as families try to manage our time well? It's something we can work on with our kids, and it could be fun to even do a family challenge around staying focused. If your child is completing their homework on a digital device, chances are some distraction is happening. Like a lot of people are talking about homework creep and how kids have more homework now than they ever did. But really look at that question, right? Because some kids may have less homework, but it's taking more time, or they may have the same amount of homework as you had, but it's taking more time because they're doing it in a place where there's so much distraction. Again, we shouldn't have to be hovering over our kids, especially as they get older and into high school, right? We probably don't want to be hovering with the homework. But at the same time, we do want to encourage good habits. So have your child evaluate how much time they spend. If you have a kid who's spending way too much time on homework on a digital device, see if turning off the Wi-Fi helps. Make sure they're not double screening, triple screening, and they're out there doing their work and they have a laptop, their phone, and maybe a tablet going. As your child gets older and older, they should be figuring out how they learn successfully. If your child needs to go into their room to do work on a connected device, that's one place where, again, I would look hard at what's really going on, especially if your teacher is telling you they're getting an hour and they're saying it takes 3. There's some disconnect happening there. So I mentioned the challenge of texting, and I think it's really important to think about mentoring new texters. A lot of us really focus on social media, but I would look at texting as a competency in and of itself and start working on texting with a kid who doesn't even have a phone yet. They may want to practice, whether it's using your phone to text the other parent, as they're interested. I mean, you don't have to sort of make your kindergartner text, but as your kids are interested in elementary school and, at whatever time they're interested in saying, I want a phone or I want to be able to do this, and start working on what are some things we text about, what are some things we would call or talk about in person. What can you do if you are offended by a text or you don't understand a text? How can you clarify? One of the most important things we need to teach kids about texting, and this is also true of comments and gaming and social media, is that when things go wrong, it's very hard to re-rail them in that same medium. So once a text message exchange has gotten to a place where one of us is offended, it's very difficult to bring it back to a good place via text. That's when we have to talk it out, ideally face-to-face. Because then we have the context of facial expression, we have the context of vocal tone, we have all of that information and it's mutual shared information. If you're texting someone and you're offended, it's best not to text back right away. And we want to teach kids that if they're feeling reactive rather than responsive, it's good to wait. We want to teach kids that they don't want to fire back an angry text at their friend if they're offended, and especially they don't want to be showing their phone around as well to recruit other kids to the conflict, which is another thing that frequently happens, especially like around middle school. Kids will sometimes say, they'll get something that offends them, and then they'll start maybe an angry exchange, and then they'll actually show it around. And what that does is it makes it much harder to repair the relationship, because if other people are involved, like maybe it's like a slow day in middle school, and other kids are like, ooh, fight. That's going to make it a lot harder, and maybe a conflict that could have been repaired by lunchtime, now that the entire grade is aware of it, is going to be a lot harder to fix. We shouldn't really be sharing pictures or even stories and information about our children without their permission. And as they get older, this becomes more and more important. We don't want our kids inhibiting their sort of silliness and adorableness at home because they're worried that we're going to share in some public space where their friends will see. And this is something I would say, start when your kids start asking about it, or proactively start doing it by the time you can have a conversation about public versus private. When your kids are very young, like preschool, maybe you're not having a conversation, but you're looking at the pictures you share with a lens toward this kid will one day be 12, they'll one day be 17, they'll one day be 25. This is a person. It may be a very, adorable person that's in front of me right now, and all I can think about is like, those cheeks are so cute. But think about how they will feel about this photo or this anecdote going forward. And if you think it might be something that would embarrass them, maybe keep it in the family by keeping it, either just text it to the grandparents, just keep it on your own phone, maybe print it out, which we forget that it's still an option, right? You could just print it out and keep it. So again, then someday you'll have it to embarrass them with, at their 30th birthday party, but maybe you don't share it with the world in a way that you can never get back, that we don't have full control over. By teaching our kids that this is an acceptable boundary, we're letting them know that it's okay for them to say no to their friends. When their friends want to take their picture and share it, we're letting them know it's okay to say, dude, don't take my picture right now, or don't share it. And we're encouraging them to have the norm of asking permission before they share. I use a bunch of different social media, so I'm not here to proselytize against social media, but I do think we want to be really aware of, just because it's convenient doesn't mean we want this to necessarily be our family album. We could take a picture of our kid and just print it out and keep it in a book. We could take it and put it in the cloud, but maybe have it password protected. There are ways to keep these treasured memories without necessarily sharing them. Another thing that can come up is sometimes our kids will see things that they weren't included in, right, when they're looking at social media, which is a hard thing to deal with, but it's very common in the digital age, and we've all been not included in things, right? Tonight there's probably a party somewhere that we're all not invited to. It's part of life. But the thing is, we can handle it more easily because we're adults and we have that context to know that we can't be everywhere all the time. For our kids, it can feel really bad. So if your kid is, and hopefully this won't happen, but it happens a lot, watching something unfold that's not happening for them, right? Like some other kid is having a sleepover and your kid is home watching the pictures get shared. That's a good time to put away the phone and do something that does make you feel good in the moment. It's very easy to get caught up watching other people's lives, but none of us should give other people or social media that kind of negative power in our lives, right? We want to use it for things that are positive. When it makes us feel good, great. If social media is making any of us feel bad, that's when we should take a break or reconsider who we're connected with in social media. YouTube is an incredible source of resources. However, there are things that we don't want our kids to see on YouTube. And the thing is, it's user-generated, so it's much different than the world of broadcast where everything's decided by a committee, and maybe there are a few things on broadcast or on a cable channel that you also don't want your kid to see, but it's still passing through some kind of standard. Anyone can put something on YouTube, which means at the worst, we're talking about violence, we're talking about pornography, right? Those are some of the things that we worry about the most as parents, that our kids will see something really horrendous, really scary. But there are a lot of things on YouTube that we might not like, and it can be hard to assess that because not everything is reviewed. Again, unlike a TV show where you could go and look it up on Common Sense Media, or you can read TV Guide and have a sense of, okay, these are the characters, this is the premise. With YouTube, you really have to watch a little with your kid. If your kid is obsessed with a channel, I would look at it with them or watch it on your own and make sure you feel comfortable with it. And when kids are young, they probably shouldn't be watching YouTube independently. It's not really a great independent activity for young. So it's really easy for kids to find things we don't want them to find on YouTube, and it's very hard to kind of wrap your mind around even where it could go. I also think for play dates, when kids are feeding off of one another, that's especially a time where we may want to be watchful about YouTube. So for me, YouTube is kind of a yellow light situation where I'm not suggesting that we all don't use YouTube at all, right? But I would try to be in the room when kids are using YouTube, or you may want to have a rule that you have to have a grown-up for YouTube. Certainly the younger the kids are, the trickier it is for them to even pre-assess a video. I was watching train videos with my 4-year-old, and he was obsessed with trains at the time, and we would travel the world, and he was like, we had just been to San Francisco, we wanted to see another BART train, so we're pulling up BART trains, and then suddenly it was the video of the police killing Oscar Grant on the BART train, and I was like, okay, let's not watch that one. Right? So it's really important that I had that context, but there would be no way for a pre-literate 4-year-old who's just going by the pictures, touching, clicking, swiping, to have any idea that he was about to see a snuff film, right? And that's a good example of that exists in the world for a reason. Someone documented that and good things came out of that documentation, and you still don't want your kids to see it. Now, in terms of specifically pornography, it's really important that we talk to kids about it and that we really make sure that they understand why we don't want them to watch it and not just don't watch it. So we want to make sure that our kids have really age-appropriate information about things like puberty and relationships, and that we go a little younger than we think, right? So be sure that you don't wait till high school, obviously, right, to talk about puberty. We really want to make sure that kids have the information that they need and that they see us as a safe source of information. If you are super uncomfortable because many of our parents didn't do a good job teaching us about these things, then make sure there's another adult in your child's life that can have these conversations, right? And it may be your child's pediatrician, it may be another family member, you know, an aunt or an uncle, but make sure that your child has at least one adult that they can go to with any question, no matter what. We want to teach people that, and all our children and the adults in our lives, that when we communicate digitally, there's another human being on the other end. That human being is sleeping, they have a family, they have their own life. If your friend doesn't get back to you right away, that doesn't mean she hates you. It just might mean she's sleeping, she's playing basketball, she's at a religious service, right? There's a million reasons. We don't want to teach our kids to do this. If you can't reach someone, don't just text them again and again and again. It's never safe to share a picture of yourself in your underpants or no clothes in the world because it can get out of your control. Your phone could be hacked, even if you don't share it. Sometimes kids will take a picture because they kind of just want to see how they look in their underwear, right? Because that's the kind of thing that you might wonder as your body changes, as you're growing up. Well, guess what? That picture's on your phone in the cloud, and it might also be mysteriously on other people's in the family's phone in ways you don't think about because you might have some kind of shared account, or it might be that you leave your phone on the bus one day, oops, or you let your friend use your phone and they see the picture and they stupidly and insensitively share it in a fit of, you know, momentary madness. So what we want, first of all, is for our kids to know that this isn't safe, but we also want them to know that we are safe to talk to. If they or their friend is in a jam, if a picture has circulated, if they were coerced, certainly if they were coerced to come to us, even if they voluntarily did something that they later regret, they should be able to always come to us and get help. What we do is we say, well, that's regrettable, that's going to be embarrassing, but life goes on. That's the message we want to give to kids. We do not want to tell kids, you've messed up forever and your life can't go on. Now, a lot of us have been sleeping with our devices, and it can be a problem. So it's something to think about. If your child is sleeping in a room with a connected device, I would really look at how is that affecting their sleep. We may not always know. Sometimes it's not a conscious, even full waking that's happening, where a kid is getting all the way awake and playing the game or texting late at night, but it may be that the phone is, you know, beeping and binging and tinging, and they're coming to a slight level of wakefulness they're not getting their full rest. So for many kids, the answer is just don't have it in their room at night. At some point, again, maybe before you drop them off at college, you may want to let them self-regulate with that. Certainly once they're in that dormitory, when they're 18 years old or thereabouts, they're not going to have someone obviously take it away. Think about, you know, do you want to let an 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old self-regulate around connected devices? Probably not. I would say even for parents who have a fairly open attitude about tech, sleep is one place where you might want to be kind of hardcore. Right, just think about both the physical and psychological benefits of getting enough sleep. It is one of the big predictors of mental health. It is the first thing I would look at for a kid who's struggling with stress and other things is this kid getting sleep? Repair is if your child messes up in their relationships, in their reputation, in their time management. And I shouldn't say if, I should say when, because we're all messing up all the time. I might share somebody's news that I thought was public. Oops, that wasn't supposed to be public. It could be something really simple like that, right? You take it back, right? All of us have probably, you know, not BCC'd when we should have, or replied all when we shouldn't have, or sent a text to the wrong person, right? We've all made errors of varying levels of consequence in our communication, and it's affected either our relationships, our reputation, or we've been unable to kind of unhook from the thing that was stealing our time, and we've messed up our time management. So these are kind of human problems. This isn't like, oh my gosh, what have you done wrong as a parent? This is like everybody's dealing with these questions. I want us to look as a community at this and say, how can we support each other, right? Whether it's a group of 8th graders who really want to, you know, ace their swim meet, so they all take Insta off their phone for a week together, as like the whole team is like, we're gonna take it off our phones for a week so we can just focus on the big meet. whether it's us as parents saying, okay, we're all going to collectively stop posting certain kinds of things on Facebook because it's a problem for the kids, right? These are really good questions to look at with our friends, and also to be really gentle with ourselves. You know what? You did do the reply all, and you didn't mean to, and you walked down the hallway at work, and this has happened to me, where things are awkward and difficult, but you walk down the hallway and you work to solve it, right? And this is how we repair. What we don't want to teach kids is that digital life is this high wire act, and if you mess up, splat, you're on the ground. That is not the message to give to 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds, because they have a lifetime ahead of them, and we all make mistakes. Instead, we talk about let's be accountable. Be the best person you can be.